let's first tackle why the Renaissance occurred. So there are two main reasons. Number one is very specific. So due to the population decrease during the plague, the remaining workers could demand higher wages. And second, trade in general made Europe wealthier. This ushered in the Renaissance because a middle class of bankers, merchants, and tradespeople emerged. Now let's talk about when and where the Renaissance occurred. So the Renaissance started in Italy in around 1300 and spread to Northern Europe in about 1450. Now there were two Renaissances. One was happening in Italy and another was happening in Northern Europe. Like mentioned previously, the Italian Renaissance started in the 1300s and ended in the 1600s, and the Northern Renaissance started in 1450 and ended in the 1600s. So even though they started 150 years apart, they still ended at the same period, the 1600s. Now let's talk about Florence. Florence was the cultural and economical hub of the Renaissance. The extra influx of cash from trade in Europe allowed cities to grow larger and independent of the kingdoms that had prospered in the Middle Ages, thus creating city-states. One of the most famous of these city-states was the Republic of Florence, which, as mentioned previously, was the cultural and economical hub of the Renaissance. Moving on, let's talk about the Medici family. Firstly, we need to get this out of the way. Each city-state developed its own niche, or specialty, and Florence was originally a wool city-state, but soon it became a banking city-state. They mass-produced gold coins called florin, which became the dominant currency in Europe. The success of florin increased the wealth of Florence, and a prominent and wealthy family became rich from banking. The Medici family was on the rise. Now let's talk about the downfall of the Medici family. The head of the Medici family, Cosimo de' Medici, began to control the politics of Florence. In other words, he was manipulating it and was the puppet master of the city-state. Cosimo's son, Piero, took over after his father, and then Piero's son, Lorenzo, replaced him. Medici power reached its peak under Lorenzo's rule, and became so powerful that the people called him Lorenzo the Magnificent. However, this pinnacle of the family did not last long, because French armies invaded and banished the Medici family. But, around 2 decades later, in 1412, a member of the Medici family, Giovanni, became Pope Leo X, who restored Medici power in Florence for the next 2 centuries. So despite the French army's invasion, the Medici family eventually came back. However, they were still hurt by the invasion. Now let's talk about art. As mentioned previously, Florence's niche was banking, but it also had another specialty, art. The Medici family sponsored the art as a small majority of many patrons, and patrons were the single reason why the Renaissance was so successful. Additionally, Lorenzo the Magnificent formed an influential art school, but that's not really that important. During the Medici's reign, artistic geniuses like Sandro Botticelli, Michelangelo, and Leonardo da Vinci flourished. Arguably the most famous Renaissance artist, Leonardo da Vinci, was a painter, sculptor, architect, musician, mathematician, engineer, inventor, an autonomist, geologist, writer, and botanist who painted The Last Supper and Mona Lisa. On the topic of art, Renaissance-style architecture also started to pop up because of Filippo Brunelleschi, who developed the first modern dome for the cathedral in Florence. Now let's talk about Humanism. Humanism was the center of the Renaissance movement. It was a system of education and thought that differed greatly from what occurred during the Middle Ages, as it was the study of worldly subjects such as grammar, history, rhetoric, and poetry rather than religious subjects in the Middle Ages. Humanists want to study the texts and cultures of the ancient Greeks and Romans, or otherwise the classical works, to increase their understanding of current times and believe that education should stimulate the individual's creative powers. Now, let's talk about the most influential invention that was created during the Renaissance. The printing press. Johannes Gutenberg created printing press with a movable metal type in 1456 to create copies of the Bible. Now, this wasn't the first printing press, but it was unique as it had a movable metal type. This invention allowed books to become cheaper, helped spread the ideas of the Renaissance, Reformation, and the Scientific Revolution, and made it possible for more people to learn, read, and write. Now let's talk about a fun fact. Many Renaissance artists and writers, like Leonardo da Vinci, excelled at many things, including architecture, painting, science, math, etc. Thus, the term Renaissance man emerged. This phrase refers to someone who's good at a wide range of things. And here are my sources. Thank you for watching.